I'm Lori K. Coleman, and today I have with me Bob Gardner. Bob is so fun. I love him. He has combined 30 years of training and created the most unique process. And this process, it releases the grip of things like anxiety, depression, but also serious addictions. And I was impressed to reach out to him and say, hey, do you want me to interview you? And just because I want to share his message. So, Bob, tell us a little bit about you and what motivated you to actually go down this path and even be willing to share any spiritual experiences that you feel comfortable doing. My audience is open to that kind of thing.
Sure. What made me go down this path? Well, I was an idiot, born like I was a boy at one point, and then, just made some really dumb decisions and ended up in my life really struggling with depression, massive bouts of depression. My wife actually at one point, several times, she wanted to take me in to get me diagnosed. She thought I was bipolar or because I would go into depressive funks and then manic sort of like highs and things like that. We never went, and I never received a diagnosis. Oh, well, those days are done. So I was struggling with a lot of depression, a lot of sometimes suicidal ideation, anxiety and stress. And then I'd come out of it here and there. And along the way, ever since I was 14, I had gotten into pornography as a kind of compulsive behavior. I got into psychedelic drugs for a period of time and was like shoplifting and doing things like that. All of these things as a way of coping with the fact that I didn't really feel great on the inside and didn't know how to manage that. And so those were the compulsive behaviors that I went to, and until my wife couldn't handle it anymore. And bless her soul, she lasted as long as she did. And then she was like, I think I'm done, because I'd crossed the line. And that's when I had to take a hard look at myself and realize that nothing was going to change unless I changed some things. And so it sort of scared me into submission in that way. And so I started looking. I had been looking for ways to solve it for a long time. I've been training in martial arts for over 3 decades. I've been training in a lot of these body-oriented practices for a long time. I had been searching for ways of handling it in functional psychology and other stuff, energy healing of a variety of different kinds. I trained and certified and worked in those fields. And all of the rhetoric around the idea of addiction and around depression even was that like it's just something you're either going to manage with drugs or you're going to manage with some other thing or 12-step meetings or whatever else, but you're just stuck with it for life. And I remember one day Jasmine had left home to go pick up the kids from school. So I was by myself in my office when I saw her leave out the window. And I felt my brain and body just like look at the computer and be like, now's our chance. And I remember in that moment, I was like, this sucks. If I have to spend the rest of my life doing this little happy dance of like trying to control myself while she's gone, I don't want to do that anymore. And I looked down the road. I was in my early 30s, and I was like, look, so let's say I got 5-6 decades. Do I really want to live that long this way? And fortunately, I wasn't suicidal at the time. And so I just was like, I got to change some things. And so I threw what everybody was telling me out the window, except for the things that I had found that worked. And I just said, look, I'm going to start to rely on observation of what works in my body, in my mind, and how all of the stuff pieces together. And then I just started following whatever guidance or inspiration I could find. And some of them were really bad ideas and they didn't help at all. And so I kind of had to go back to the drawing board until I was able to piece together a couple of pieces here and there, and went through some massive processes that just turned the thing around really quickly. So I had spent a lot of time developing skill sets that helped me manage the emotional piece and actually start to clear out the emotional piece. But when it came down to finding the core issues about addictive behaviors and stuff like that, that was something I had to kind of piece together on my own. And then when I did, like within a few days, I was done and it was behind me. And then I didn't do anything for a long time because I was like, I'm a weirdo. and maybe it just worked for me. And so at, I was in a business mastermind trying to work together, doing some of this energy healing work that I was doing, other body work stuff. I was running a martial arts school at the time. And then, but I was struggling. I had like four jobs, and I was trying to put food on the table. And I had a business coach go like, look, dude, like nobody understands or knows how to work with addiction in general, let alone pornography or sexual addiction. The people who are handling depression, there's stuff that helps, but it takes a long time, and there's medications involved, and there's a lot of trial and error in that arena. And still, we don't know long-term side effects. He's like, if you really know how to help people, you need to go help people. And the guy was intimidating. he, he was in my face in front of like 500 people. And I was like, yes, sir. And so he's like, if you're okay with it, you have 3 days, go put a video together and put your stuff out there online. So I threw my entire life history online, and I probably should have warned my family about that before I did it.
I've done that to my husband a little bit.
There was a little bit of collateral damage on that one that we had to do damage control with. But then I just started working with people, and that was several years ago. And it took me, the first few people that I worked with were people that were just like, I don't know what I'm doing. You've seemed to figure stuff out. Just tell me what to do. So they didn't care that they were the guinea pigs. So it took me about 8 months to figure out what were the things that were kind of like universally applicable. What were the things that were just like worked for me? What are some of the core processes that everybody going through them would be helpful? And so then I put together the very first iteration of the programs and processes that I did. And then we've since helped about 800 people.
That's amazing and wonderful. And do you hear from these people that they are as free from that as you are yourself?
Yeah. I mean, some of them take a little bit longer to get through all the pieces of the puzzle than others, but yeah. I mean, I just barely got a 2-year update from one guy the other day. So he's doing amazing.
That is so wonderful. It really is. It really is. And so what spiritual experience did you have that made you brave enough to become the porn guy helper?
I mean, on one level, I mean, there are two really that helped to shift my focus in terms of one, like really going the direction that was helpful for me. Mm-hmm. And then go help other people. It was really just desperation. I needed to put food on the table for my family because we were like in dire straits. And it was very clear. And I hadn't realized it before that like this was a big issue for a lot of people, and they were actually looking for other solutions. And it took a real life person to get in my face and tell me that. And as much as that doesn't sound spiritual, for me, I think a lot of the most spiritual experiences I've had have come through another person too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
And so in that case, it was just a very, very clear in that moment when he was asking me, like he was grilling me about the business I was trying to run. And he was asking me like, wait, what do you do? What do you know really well? Like, what are the things? And it was rough because, in front of all these people to just be like, well, I know porn addiction and I know fatherhood. And he's like, wait a second, hold on. And so then he started grilling me on it. And it was in that moment that he was like, you don't seem to understand how big an issue this is, how many people are struggling with it, let alone all of the depression and the anxiety and stuff that goes with it. And it was the realization that all of the stuff I'd been through, rather than running from it, if I actually just leaned into it, it was actually a great gift to be able to give to other people. And now it's just beautiful. I think the most glorious experience I've had with it was when one of my earliest clients is Tucker, who works with me as my business partner right now. And he wanted to come on, and his sister was struggling with just self-hatred and some struggles with emotional stuff. And she was overeating. So it wasn't porn addiction or anything of the sort. And she was his first client. Like he just coached her through the whole process, took her through everything. And I never actually ended up talking to her at all. And then at the very end, she sent in like a little like review of things. And the review said, look, I don't want to kill myself anymore. I don't hate myself when I look in the mirror. I actually love being alive and I'm genuinely happy. And I just broke down in massive tears to see that something I had created had been passed on to somebody else and it had saved another person's life without me ever having to have touched it. It was one of the most rewarding experiences I'd ever had.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I know in my situation with depression, anxiety, I have so much that I do proactively to
Mhm.
not go there. And it is so hard to stay, because I'm not doing it with any pharmaceutical medications. I just react very severely to just regular like corn syrup and sugar, and
Yeah, yeah.
let alone wheat or corn or the other stuff. But and I know that when I dip down into that place of depression, I'm really good at staying happy and peaceful and experiencing joy. But if I cheat with my diet,
Mhm.
then I dip. And when I dip down deep, I'm stuck there for a handful of days. And then before I know it, I do get suicidal tendencies. And so that's one of the reasons why just the other day, after feeling I should reach out to you, I was thinking I just wanted to share it with other people. I'm like, wait a minute, maybe I should work. Because, and the thing is I've learned so much and I'm doing so well, but the effort that it takes me to do
Yeah.
so well, it's, and yeah, yeah. So it's just, I think it's something that can
That's
serve
a
so
great,
many
that's a
people.
great observation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's just interesting, you know. So it, and I'm open to digging into rewiring emotional reactions when I am that deep in the chemical sludge that comes to me from eating just regular food that other people can eat.
Right.
It turns to me this huge sludge and huge, it's so hard. So talk to me for a minute about why it's even possible to rewire emotional reactions
Mhm.
and how you do that. And mine's a physical one, but it does get into the emotion because I feel the depression and it's heavy and hard.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to understand that there are a lot of things that are chemical in the body that get mistaken for emotions when they're not actually emotions. For instance,
Mhm.
like a woman every month goes through hormonal slips and whatnot, and those get mistaken for emotions when they're not. Emotions actually feel a little bit different in the body. And Jasmine, my wife, is really good. Like we've looked and talked about this a long time, where she's really like very clear on, oh, I'm hormonal right now. And so then she doesn't treat it like an emotion and she doesn't end up going into all these like funks because it's chemistry. And emotion on one level is predominantly chemistry. It's not entirely chemistry, but it's predominantly chemistry. So some of the things that can be mistaken for an emotion are obviously hormonal changes, illness, that's a chemical change in the body.
Mhm.
And people are crotchety when they're ill. uh, you take a substance into your body, that'll do it. So if you get a shot or a vaccine or you eat something that is like food poisoning
To
or
you personally.
yeah, like to you personally or something that you're allergic to or something like that, then your body has a reaction and that's not an emotion, but you can layer emotion on top of it if you have the freak out of it, right?
Mhm.
And so I think it's really important to be able to distinguish between your body's reaction to its environment, which some of which you may not be able to have control over, and your own emotional response to your body. And
Yes.
that's where the two like really drive, that's where to really drive deep. So if you think about life, ultimately there's basically four different parts of the puzzle. The first part is the environment, and we have very minimal like control over our environment as much as we'd like to. Like we don't control when the sun goes up or goes down, we don't control the temperature or the weather, we don't control when somebody else responds the way we want to or not, like we'd like to. But very little. So the first part we have very little say in. There are some things you can do to control your environment, to craft your life well. And there's a lot of coaches out there that try to do that so that you've tried to create a buffer zone where you're no longer dealing with stuff. And that's great and wonderful. But I wasn't interested in that because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to control stuff. And if I spent my life trying to control my environment, I was going to be more anxious than I was before. And some of the people I trained with are people like ex-Russian operatives and people who'd been in deep spy work and like had taken down third world countries and stuff. They have no say in what the environment's going to be in. Their job is go in, do your job, get out, you know? And so I'm training with them. And so then the next piece that comes in is like, cool, the environment changes. My body automatically responds to the change. And in that automatic response to that change, what happens is there's a chemical shift that goes on the inside. And now my brain is looking down going, what just happened? So the third piece of the puzzle is that now my brain starts running through its Rolodex, looking for any time in the past where this has happened. And as it's looking for any time in the past where this has happened, it starts coming up with stuff. Oh, I know what this is. And it starts looking at concepts you got in mind. Oh, that's this or that's that. And anytime, now we're dealing with memory and we're not dealing with reality anymore. And as soon as that happens, then the body reacts, stage 4, to the brain's thoughts. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It, like your muscles will tighten up because of what you're thinking and
Exactly.
stuff like that. Yeah.
And
Or
so,
you don't breathe as deeply or yeah.
Yeah. So we're dealing with environment changes, body response. Then we're dealing with mind response to body, and then body response to what the mind thinks. So people get stuck in the 3rd and 4th section all the time. Oh, I don't know what's happening. Let's talk about it. Let's reframe it. Let's think about it differently. But they're stuck there. And what I wanted was my body to start to dance differently with life. And so that's where I started spending a lot of time trying to understand how to work with the body's instinctive responses to its environment. And that means dismantling things that would be triggering. That means shaping how the body responds to an initial fear response. So if it automatically dissipates it immediately, then the brain doesn't have time to turn it into something bigger. Mm-hmm. And so I started working with a lot of breathing and movement and body processes and simple, really subtle listening to the body and the body's energies to start to train it step by step to handle changes in my environment or different environmental cues differently. And then all of a sudden, that means I didn't have any of the thought processes to cope with anymore. And so I was left with, cool. Well, if I don't have anything to cope with anymore, then life's pretty good.
Yeah. I'm seeing a notice on our recording that your bandwidth is low and you're frozen a couple of times. I'm hoping that the words are going to come through and that we'll hear all that you have to share with us. So hopefully now the connection will be a little bit better for us. And do you want to say anything else about why it's possible to rewire emotional reactions and how you like to do that?
Yeah, sure. So why is it possible to rewire emotional reactions? Well, because that's how they're built. They're just habits. An emotional response to something is literally body reacted, mind was like, what are we doing here? And then it produces the emotion of that. And the whole point of an emotional response is to help you process the environment and be safe. That's it. Well, just like when you're a little kid, you learn one way of tying your shoe, but that doesn't mean it's the only way. And that doesn't mean you can't learn another way. We just often don't go back and go like, oh, wait, maybe there's another way to do it. Or you learn one way to make food. My dad, when he was a young kid, my grandma used to be irritated with them stirring all of the dry ingredients up because they would get it all over the counter because they'd do it every which way. And so she told my dad when he was young, you have to stir the ingredients only one direction because if you stir them the other way, they undo. And he believed her because he trusted his mom and he didn't think twice about it until he was 16. Now, that didn't mean that suddenly at 16, the laws of nature had changed. And just like at that point, he's like, oh, wait a second, what? And it was just because at that moment was the moment where he questioned it. And it was the moment of questioning that allowed another possibility to show up. He could have learned that anytime, but he only learned it then because that was the moment of questioning. Emotional response is just a really, really subtle physical habit. That's all it is. So it's no different than learning to brush your teeth. It just takes a little bit more awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're making little roads like through a tall grass area, and you're walking to that grass, and the more you walk through it, the more wide the road is and the easier it is to go down that path. And it's easier to have a new reaction because now you have a new road to flow down.
Yeah.
So you can choose a more positive reaction.
Absolutely.
But, yeah. So you were talking about being a kid, and we know that that's when our subconscious is programmed with so many things. So how do you like to figure out what's in that subconscious area to even try and attempt to make any changes?
So this is a big problematic issue with a lot of research out there, because there's a lot of ideas that enter the public consciousness. And so everybody in the world's like, oh yeah, this, that, or the other. But a lot of the ideas around the subconscious are ideas that showed up before we had any real instrumentation to measure what's going on in the mind. And so this is like Sigmund Freud, and since he was right about everything, we should probably listen to him, right? And Carl, what they had were theories. What they had were ideas that there are these hidden parts of the mind that are doing stuff. But modern neurological research, from everything that they can find out, they can't pinpoint the location of consciousness in the mind. They can't pinpoint the location of identity necessarily. And there is no evidence that there is an actual subconscious mind. So there are processes that the body is doing. Mm-hmm. But at any given time, when a person's like, oh man, my subconscious is working against me. No, that's not actually what's going on. The body's just a habitual creature by nature, and it's just doing its habits. So if we want to start talking about habits, that's a lot easier to handle than the idea that a person is somehow divided inside themselves and there's a subconscious part that is like beating up the conscious guy and like, taking him for a spin. But that's what the general mass of the population believes, that there's a percentage of the mind that's subconscious and then the rest is not. And that's not actually true.
Interesting.
There isn't actually any evidence of a subconscious mind. In fact, the way the neurological networks of the mind are built, they're built to operate in parallel processes. Mm-hmm. Meaning like if I need a function done and I need to have multiple things happen with it, then each neural network gets tied up with those and we do it all together. And there's no space for there to be some subconscious somewhere else that's trying to do things the other way.
Interesting. But doesn't it feel like sometimes you're trying to drive a car with the emergency brake on? One time I was trying to teach my son to start the truck, and it was a gear shift. And I had the emergency brake on and I didn't know it. And he could not go forward. He just could not go forward.
So that feeling is a very real observation. And I think that is a good place to start from. Oh, it feels like I'm like working against myself. Well, that's a very real experience, but that's a present moment experience. It's not your childhood you're dealing with. You're dealing with a present moment recreation of your body responding to a bunch of environmental cues and all of the different neural networks that are associated with that responding to it. That's a lot easier to deal with. This moment, my body's reacting, than saying, oh, when I was a kid, I had all of these things happen, and now I have to go back in and resolve all my childhood trauma.
And that just keeps you in these stories of this happened to me, this happened to me. My famous story is I had hip dysplasia and I was trapped in a brace and couldn't move, and I'm just like, why can't I move forward? Well, it must be because I was.
Yeah.
As a baby trapped in a brace. I don't know, but.
Well, like this happened to me. Like when I spent 3.5 years studying deeply in like human anatomy and understanding the relationship between anatomical structures and energetic inertia that gets stuck in it and all these other things with biodynamic craniosacral therapy and other things. And at one point, my teacher, she wanted a session. So I got up, she was on the table and I'm sitting there holding her head like around the bottom part of her occiput here, and like hands are on the parietal bones. And I'm just sitting there feeling this incredible surge of massive cold energy coming off at the top of her head. And I'm sitting here like, wow, this is intense. This feels like an incredibly, like, it's both shock and a fight at the same time. And she goes, oh my gosh, that's that's birth trauma. That I was a forceps baby and I was pulled out right there just by that. And I was like, oh, really? Has this come up before? And she's like, oh yeah, it's come up quite a bit, like a lot ever since I started doing this work. And I was like, how long ago did you start doing this? And she said, 14 years. At that point in time, my brain went like,
that's a long time. Can't it be resolved?
how long did it take you to be born? Like what? 14 years to resolve, like someone tugged on your head for 10 minutes? Like, hold on a sec. And that was where I was like, okay, there have to be more efficient processes, because I've seen healing happen with those. So I'm not downgrading.
Oh, I'm not either. Absolutely not.
But like, come on, really? Like 14 years to continue in the same story? What was really happening was that the body in that moment felt the need to release whatever it was that it had been holding. And it presented to her mind as, oh yeah, that's how I'll make sense of it. That's my birth trauma. That's very different. Our minds make sense of all kinds of stuff in all kinds of ways, not all of which are accurate, but the sensations we're having are there. And
right.
So it doesn't really matter how we make sense of it. What matters is that we pay attention to the body. And
that's very true. And the thing is, like with my hip dysplasia, having those certain tendons got shortened and I think certain energies can be trapped in there and they need to be released on a physical level. And that's why I'm getting more into the yoga aspect to try and release some of those through that. But, and I remember when I was about 6 years old, our family decided to exercise and we were doing leg lifts, sideways leg lifts. And I'm like, Mom, my hip, it just hurts. I didn't know at that time that I was a baby with hip dysplasia and was in a brace. And she had forgotten herself. She's like, oh, maybe this is too hard on your hips to do because you have no muscles and or not no muscles, but anyway, it was interesting how I just feel like I need to learn how to deal with that pain, to strengthen it and learn to let release what is still tightened in the physical aspect.
Yeah, so there's like habitual tension patterns from the muscles. Mm-hmm. There's chemistry that gets locked in between those muscle fibers. Like, so if you did have emotional responses in there, then your body's swimming in that while the muscles are tightening, then that kind of chemistry, which feels like an emotion, can get locked inside of the muscles. And so some people will say the body stores emotion. Well, it's not actually storing emotion. It's chemistry, muscle tension patterns, connective tissue, certain energetic vectors or things happening. That's what the body's storing. It's not storing a thing called emotion. Emotion is our response to what the body's storing, which is why two people can have the same physiological condition and have opposite emotional reactions to it. It's because the emotion is in our relationship to it. That can be retrained.
Right. And like, I know for me, when doctors try to touch my hip areas to adjust or whatever, I tense up in fear. And that extra fear tension is a learned behavior that I can choose to unlearn.
Yeah. And it doesn't take that long. It just takes a little bit of consciousness about how to, even if someone's touching that, like how to release your body from the fear. And we do a lot of that stuff with people.
Yeah. And I've worked through that myself to be able to do that. But anyway, that's interesting. So let's talk. What is your favorite way to retrain the nervous system?
Body, 100%. It's really, there's enough people out there in the world, talking about how to like work your thoughts and practice your thought processes and get the neurology in a certain way. But if you consider the nervous system as a bunch of neurons, right? Every area of your body has neurons in it. So the whole body is the brain. And too often we only focus on the brain inside the cranium as if that's what we're trying to retrain. But like, for instance, the 40,000 neurons in the atrioventricular node of the heart, they have intelligence, they have the ability to have memory, to learn, and to respond. And in the electromagnetic field of the heart is like 16 feet outside your body. So that means they're learning by picking up the environment and how it's interacting with your heart. So that means your heart has a muscle memory. And too many people are busy trying to constantly reframe and think through it. And the mind is like a massive, briar patch. You can get out of one and be like, okay, I got out of that one. Now where am I? And you can just run in circles forever. But the body, when you've had the body really imprinted and gone through an experience, the body doesn't forget it that easily. And that provides a really incredible platform to then go back and handle whatever thoughts are left. So I work a lot with, and predominantly with, the body, helping a person have physiological experiences of freedom, of control, of power, of the ability and discovering their ability to not be stressed and to release fear and all of these other things. Because when the body experiences it, then their brain's like, oh, okay.
That's called safe.
All right, well, then I guess we're okay then. No different than if you had like walked out your front door and if you step on a snake, you're going to have a reaction. But if you then look down and you see, oh, it's a rope, the body just releases all the crud. If you don't look down and see it's a rope and someone's just like, I promise it's not a snake, it's just a rope, it takes a long time to convince a person like, okay, I guess I'll chill out then. But as soon as they see it, as soon as they have the experience of like, oh yeah, that's a rope, then all of the stuff leaves. And so the most long lasting effects I've seen from retraining the nervous system, and the quickest ones, come from having the body have a visceral experience of realization that helps it realize, oh, things are not like what I thought they were. I guess we're okay then. And then
So do you do that through movement and breath?
Movement, breath, roughhousing and play, martial arts stuff. Anytime that I can take what's going on in the world and turn it into a physical experience, I do it in all kinds of different ways, from deep tissue body work, like really intense, putting people in very uncomfortable positions and then having them discover that they're okay. And then they're like, oh, I guess I'm okay. And then that alleviates any part of their life that also matches that. So if you think about it, anybody who has cutting words or is saying something that's a little sharp, well, that can be represented by, say, a knife. And so now if you learn and you're playing with a physical knife, it's easier to deal with because you can see it. And then you can train yourself to be like, okay, cool. And then the next time somebody has a word like that, your body recognizes that feeling. And it's like, oh, I know what to do here. And then it handles it in the same way. So wherever I can create a physiological analog to what people are handling, and, singing, dancing, all kinds of stuff, like there's all kinds of exercise, like I do it in a variety of different ways, because as soon as I can get their body to learn it, then the rest of it will come eventually.
Nice. Well, I would like us to experience some things that might help, whether shifting a mood and mindset or a 3-minute breathing exercise, something like that. Can you walk us through a little process?
Sure. So, this is a breathing exercise that is gonna, we'll do 3 minutes. I don't have a timer. I can pull up a timer, I guess. Let me pull up a timer here.
Yeah, I'll let you pull up the timer instead of me trying to time you.
Yeah, right. 3-minute timer. And okay, so what you're going to do is this is a pretty intense form of breathing. There's a lot of different ways to breathe depending on what you're trying to experience in the body. This is one that I have everybody that we work with do every day, at least once a day, preferably on an empty stomach. So like before you eat breakfast, do this. Before you eat dinner, do this, right? And the fastest way to change the chemical constituency of the body, which ultimately is going to be your emotional state, is through breathing. Now, it's not the fastest way ultimately. Thought is the fastest way, but thought can also change back really fast too. I'm sure you guys know this. And so breathing gets rid of that component, and we actually force the body into a different chemical space that lasts for a lot longer. And this, like 3 minutes, will probably last, 30, 40 minutes before like your body starts to can go back into another space, depending on what you do afterwards. And if you're doing this for a good solid 15 minutes or stuff, depending on how we put those together, it can last for 4 to 6 hours, where you've basically primed your body to be immune to stress and those types of overwhelm and those types of negative emotions. So what you're going to do is you're going to breathe in, if possible, through your nose to 100% capacity. And that means the bottom lobe of the lungs, the middle lobe of the lungs, and the upper lobe of the lungs, and the sinus cavities. So
sinus cavities.
Yeah, air goes through those, right? So
yeah, they do. Just never thought of that.
Right? We all get to be airheads today. Right?
Woohoo! Welcome to my world.
And then when you let go, you're just going to relax. So you're going to fully in 100%. And then, and so it won't push all the air out. It won't be like, so it'll only be maybe 70, 80% out. So 100 in, 80% out. What this means is you're going to be supercharging the oxygen in the body and changing the chemoreceptors in the brain. So shifting their baseline so that they're trying to figure out what's a better baseline for you. So you're going to just go 100% in, let go. We'll do it for 3 minutes.
Do we relax as we're coming in?
I'll do it with you so you can see, but
Okay.
ultimately, if you breathe in, you can do a little bit of movement to help your lungs expand.
Okay.
Now, one key element is don't force it. So if you find yourself like, that's just, you're burning the oxygen as it comes up with all the muscle tension and you're stressing yourself out. And this is already stressful enough. So try and keep it as relaxed as possible, as fast as you can, while still keeping it as relaxed as possible. Okay. So it'll probably be a decent pace somewhere around like something like that. Okay.
Got it.
And then at the end, I'll coach you through what you're going to do in terms of holding your breath for a period of time. And then we'll hold it again. And then we'll do a little bit of physical like tension and then we'll be done. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
So here we go. Oops, I didn't. 3 minutes and begin. Breathe in, fully in. Keep breathing. As you're breathing, just remember that the oxygen is being pushed into you from the atmosphere. So don't try to force it. Don't feel like you have to suck the air in. You're letting the air in. You're expanding and letting the air come into you. The way the human body is built and the breath works, it's the atmosphere that's breathing you. We just pretend that we're the ones doing it. So keep the breath in, 100% in, and let go. You may find tingles in your hands or other sensations going through your body. Maybe you get a little lightheaded. It's okay. Make sure you're sitting down. Okay.
Don't drive.
Don't drive while doing this. Don't swim while doing this, right? Operating heavy machinery, all that good stuff. Fully in, let go. 100% in. So we're coming up on halfway. I'm going to speed you up a little bit as we get there. So just keep going and then just start to speed up just a little bit. So it'll be a little more taxing on your sympathetic nervous system now, which is important because that's where most people hold trauma. So speed up just a little bit. Never forcing it, but still allowing yourself to get 100% in and let go. 100% in, let go. We have about a minute left, so you're 2/3 of the way done. You're almost there. You can keep going, keep going. If you need to get it in through your mouth because your nose is stuffed, that's okay. You can breathe in through your mouth too. Not a big deal. This is just a short amount of time. You've got about 30 seconds left. Keep breathing. Now go a little bit faster still. Fully in, let go. 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Now one slow one. All the way in, let go. Second time. Really feel it in your hands and feet as you breathe, let go. Third time. And relax. Now hold your breath on empty. Just hold it right there as long as you can. Notice all the sensations in your body. Notice what's going on in your feet, at the surface of your skin, underneath the skin, in the very center where your spine is, in the center of your head. You hold it as long as you can. When you feel like you need to breathe, just give it a couple more seconds. There's plenty of oxygen in your body. And then breathe in and hold on full and just lightly squeeze and stretch for about 10 seconds. But don't do that until you really need to breathe. Just notice what's happening. Tune into the feeling on the inside when we've cut out a lot of the white noise. And there's just you, your being, right there in the middle. And then when you breathe in, stretch and just tense the muscles lightly, open the fingers, right? So you're using up some of this oxygen, but you're holding your breath on full for about 10, 15 seconds. And then when you're done, just relax and then breathe like normal. And then notice the center of your body again. Notice what's happening under the skin. Notice all the different sensations and what you feel. And there's no right or wrong thing to feel here. Most people spend their whole life without even being aware of what's happening underneath their skin. And that's why we get blindsided by stuff in our body, whether it's emotions or whether it's illness. It's not because we're dumb or we're not worth anything or the universe is against us. It's literally because nobody ever taught us to pay attention to these critical things in life. They taught us to pay attention to what other people think about us. They taught us to pay attention about rules of the road, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But what's sustaining your life is something that is far deeper than that. And that, if you give that priority, you'll start to become aware of what's happening in your system. It might be uncomfortable at times, might not, but that's information that you want to know, because that's where you can start shifting the body instead of waiting until you have all of these thought kerfuffles happen afterwards.
Thank you. That reminded me of things that I do in my Kundalini yoga and other Nidra yoga training.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's that 3 minute is so valuable. It's enough to have that nervous system be different. And,
Yeah.
and then the holding the breath until you can't is like a little death experience. It's like, and then your brain's like, oh, we survived and can celebrate and can rewrite things that way.
It also enhances neuroplasticity. Like when you encounter death a little bit, your brain, when CO2 spikes in the brain and these other things start to happen, which is building up while you're holding your breath, your brain starts to get creative. It's like, okay, what do we need to let go of? And what would be more efficient for our system so that we can survive? And so if you want to be able to have your neural pathways change more rapidly, no, I'm not suggesting go like, play chicken with cars or something, but this is a basic way of encountering death that can prioritize what's most important for your life in a very, very simple way. So you don't need to go get a katana blade and chase down a samurai somewhere. You can actually just like breathe and hold your breath. What I'll say though is this: one, don't hold your breath during the day unless you're doing it for training. You want to be continuously breathing throughout the day so that you're oxygenating your system. But breath holds done deliberately and on purpose change the body's response. So if you're holding your breath unconsciously, the body reacts to it in a very negative way. Holding it consciously shifts things in the system that is very, very different. Just like burning fat. You can burn fat when you're under stress, and it actually releases some toxins in the body, even though you're getting energy. When you burn fat from joy and play, the toxins aren't released. So same amount of energy, but one of them is toxic and the other one's not.
So let's have joy and play.
I've been trying to teach people how to do this and to do it automatically. Like my interest was, I was so lazy, like lazy or efficient or however you want to say it. Like I wasn't interested in having it be like, I have a ton of tools that I do every day and it's a lot of work to be happy. Because I was like, when I'm happy, it's not a lot of work. I feel great. It's unhappiness that's a lot of work.
Seriously, yeah.
And so I was like, how do I train my system to just like set up camp in the happiness
So
land?
what is your daily routine that you do to help you do that?
So it started differently, and I would do this breath stuff every day, and I still do that particular one here and there, but I have other deeper yogic practices that I do and martial arts practices and stuff that are all breath oriented. So there's breathing and stretching and movement and very, very conscious awareness of the system. So I'll wake up in the morning and I'll spend some time. I do sound work with my voice to kind of bring my
Oh,
cardiac.
that vibration of sound.
It brings my cardiac rhythms and mental rhythms into a level of coherence, and they've seen this with medical research and all the stuff that I do that I teach people. Like I've tried a whole bunch of stuff, but the stuff I teach people, I try to make sure is all backed by some level of medical science, so that they're not like, because we can borrow stuff from other traditions and it feels like a religious thing, and I don't ever want anybody to feel like, oh no, my religion's being challenged. So I'm very careful to like share with them practical ways of handling things. And as much as possible, all of those things have a lot of research behind them indicating how good they are with the system.
And that's so nice. That's because like with my Kundalini stuff, they have us chanting certain sounds like Satnam, which is
Right.
my true identity. But that could really freak somebody out to have to be doing a seed sound like that,
Right.
But the reality is your vagus nerve chills out when you have that vibration in your throat. So it can be, so yeah.
It touches every single internal organ. Like the vagus nerve is a very big nerve. What they've done research though on the sounds, and they've done research on repetitive sounds. So if somebody who's watching is like nervous about Sanskrit words or something else, they've tested just repeated sounds for the, like they had a group of people do the number one in Hebrew, echad, and they had them repeat it over and over again, and they found that it started to downregulate without affecting blood oxygen levels and whatnot, which was really powerful for that. It actually enhanced the body's ability to be efficient, but it got rid of all the ruminating thoughts and the sort of negative downward spirals that would happen, and help bring them into a state of like more presence. And this was a sound that they repeated in their head. They didn't even say it out loud.
Isn't that fascinating how just thinking it does it too?
Because thinking is a reverberation, and then
it is more subtle.
Right? And they did it with a word that they was like, this isn't in any tradition. So they chose the number one, but they even chose that in Hebrew just in case that was weird for people. And they had them just repeat it in their head, right? And so it could be any sound. Now, there isn't enough research. There isn't really any research on the way different of these types of words would affect stuff. But there is some research on the difference between, say, classical music and rock and roll music and Gregorian chants and Sanskrit chants on the DNA. And what they found is, well, sorry, rock and roll.
You're out.
But, that's not to say that like your joy can't counteract that. So you're not out. But classical music is sort of like neutral. So it neither enhances nor detracts, but they found that Gregorian chants actually enhanced the DNA's ability to absorb vitamin D and other types of things. And same with Sanskrit chants. So notice that's like a Hindu tradition, and that's a Christian tradition.
Yeah.
And it's not about the tradition itself, it's about the repeated sound, which is why when you have people doing like Hail Marys or other repetitive prayers, mentally, it's doing the same thing. So there's a lot of research that backs, religious practices that sometimes we get up in arms about, saying vain repetitions about prayer and stuff, but it's not a vain repetition. If vain just means fleeting, meaning it left your head and you didn't think about it. But if it's a repetition of substance, meaning you're doing it over and over deliberately, it's actually changing your DNA.
Yeah. That's my jam.
Yeah. So I'll do daily. I'll do a little bit of that, and then I'll do a couple of different varieties of breath work, and I'll do some yogic stretching and martial arts movement. And then in the evening, I'll do it again as well. And I take a cold shower, and then I have a green smoothie. And
I have not been able to get myself to do the cold shower thing. oh, baby, I know it can reset your nervous system and but
Just do it a couple degrees cooler than normal. It doesn't have to be ice cold. Like
uh-huh.
just a couple degrees cooler and start warm and then just turn it cold at the end so that your body's warm enough. Like you only need about 30 seconds to a minute of the cool in order for your system to have all the norepinephrine dump and all the other stuff that happens with it. So you don't need to like just get in forever. I do straight.
As your Bob.
Well, but I'm not even in there forever. You know, there are others that go way longer, but like I just go in straight cold because I've already done some exercise first. So my body's already warmed up. And so then it's not a big deal, you know.
Well, I cannot believe that we have spent an hour together. I wanted to ask you other questions, but I won't take any more of your time. I will put in the notes for this, how to contact you.
Okay.
And there's other things that I've seen you talk about, an escape method for dealing with your emotions, switching between emotions, and just, I feel that the way you package things could be, my ideal client is not the severe addictions kind of, that's not my ideal client. And I like, you know, anxiety, depression I can do, but not the deep suicidal type. But I like how you are willing to work with that kind of deep situation and that your process is working for them. So I hope that, and I hope that people seeing your personality, that they will say, hey, husband, hey, son, you might like to work with this guy because he could seriously help you and it would be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I want it to be fun. Ultimately, it's as much as it sounds like these are deep issues, when you really understand what's going on, it's simple. It's very, very simple. There's nothing complicated about addiction. There's nothing complicated about depression or anxiety, nothing complicated at all. It feels complicated when you're in the middle of it. But when you really understand what's going on, it's not complicated. It might take a little bit of time to get all the ducks in a row, but not that much time either if you do it the right way. And if you handle the whole person, not just, you know, pray and do the spiritual stuff. That's important for a lot of piece. Like we're not denigrating that. That's one piece though of the puzzle. And then nutrition, you work a lot with nutrition. You've had to because of
I've had to.
Right? And so like, that's a huge piece of the puzzle, but that's not the only piece. And a lot of people want to say, oh no, if you just handle your nutrition, it'll handle everything else. No, how you breathe, that's the only thing keeping you alive. Like, why don't we train this? Well, okay, let's learn how to breathe differently, how you move, and so that your movements stop producing stress responses in your system. And like how you handle your memories and anything that may have happened. They're not that difficult to shift and to change. It's just it's the whole you. And when the whole you lives joyfully, we don't have to worry about all the other stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Bob. I thoroughly enjoyed our time together and I appreciate it. I do want to mention, so you do have a women's retreat coming up. You say you're not going to be doing other of those in the future, but anyway, I am very happy that after I did a meditation, I felt strongly that I should go. And so I'm like, I'm going to go play with Bob.
It'll be fun. Yeah, this one, we don't have plans to do another one in the future. If there's enough demand, we'll be happy to accommodate. This is our third one. It's just that, you know, women have been harder to pin down. Or they feel like I'm a guy and maybe I can't help them or whatever else it is. But so we have this one coming up. It's just in a couple of weeks, starts September 22nd, goes through the 25th. And we're offering a discount for you guys if you want to come. We would just like to fill it up. We have space for, I think, 8 more women who could come, and I would love to fill it up and have it full and help as many women are ready to come. And we cover the room and the housing and the food and all the logistics while you're there. So all you have to do is show up and we'll take care of you, and you'll be taken care of by guys for once.
No, it sounds like it'll be a very amazing experience. And so thank you. And we'll say goodbye to our friends and appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.